picked up this Fujifilm X100VI on launch around 6 months ago, and since then it's fast become my most used camera. I brought it with me on my trips to Japan and I've used it extensively since the day it came out. That said, it's not a perfect camera. I have some issues with it which I will talk about in this episode, and I'll also discuss who's this camera for and whether it's worth both the effort and price to pick one up. Now, one of the most annoying things about the X100VI is how hard it is to buy at the moment. So due to shortages and other supply chain issues at Fujifilm, this camera is still really hard to find and buy. That aside, this camera costs around £1,600, which is roughly the same amount of money for an X-T5. Obviously, the X-T5 doesn't come with a lens, but that aside, it is an expensive camera. Let's talk about some of the positives with the X100VI. First up is the build quality. With Fujifilm cameras in general, I felt in the last 2 to 3 years there has been a slight dip when it comes to build quality and durability. But with that said, I have used this camera extensively. I've traveled with it. I've used it in the rain. Just the other day I took it to Seven Sisters and the rainfall was insane. It doesn't really have any marks or major scratches on it at all. The screen isn't scratched up. I also find the camera easy to hold and use in general. I mostly use it one-handed. I don't really get too tired holding it. And that brings me on to one of the best things about the X100VI. It's just how much they get into a camera this size and this weight. Now, I'm going to get into this in a bit more detail shortly, but the video capabilities of this camera are incredible. The image quality is great. And as I said, to get that all in a camera this small and this lightweight really is impressive. The only other camera I can think of which comes close is the Ricoh GR3, but that camera does not take good video at all, and the image quality on the X100VI is better than what you get on a Ricoh, but more on that shortly. Another really and underrated feature is the internal ND filters. Now, those of you into video will know whenever you shoot during daytime, you're going to need an ND filter. Otherwise, you're going to be recording everything at f16 and above, and that never looks good. But with this camera, you have internal ND filters and they work really well. I mean, I can shoot at f2 to f4 during bright midday sunlight. And when it comes to photography too, it allows you to get creative. So you can shoot long exposure during daytime. If you wanted to do any of that with a regular camera and a regular lens, you'd have to take an ND filter with you. Next up, image quality. I know lots of people are obsessed with megapixel counts and sharpness, so this camera has the same sensor as the one you find in the X-T5. The image quality is really good. I honestly can't tell the difference between the shots I take on this camera and the ones I take on my X-T5, and when it comes to video, it really is impressive. Now, whenever I go out to shoot, I'm normally always recording a mixture of photos and video. And with this camera, it never feels like I'm compromising one for another. Even if I'm using an X-T5, I'll have to bring an ND filter with me. And that gets a bit annoying sometimes, as you have to pull it on the front of the lens, take it off. Sometimes you forget it's there, or sometimes you forget it to put it on. Whereas with the X100VI, it's at a touch of a button. So recording video, taking photos, there's no compromise. The video I take on this is pretty much on par with what I'm taking on my X-T5. And again, this is a feature of this camera which I haven't seen talked about as much as it should be. The X100VI is more of a lightweight hybrid shooter where I can capture really high quality video and really high quality photos. Fujifilm also managed to include IBIS within this body, which again is incredible for a camera this size, and it does make a big difference when you're shooting video. Fujifilm's in-body stabilization isn't the best when you compare it to Panasonic and Sony, but without it, even shooting static scenes handheld can be difficult. And in my experience, the IBIS works pretty good, and again, for this to be included in a body so small is really impressive. Now, with all that said, as I mentioned in the intro, this camera is not perfect. And one of the main things I dislike about the X100VI is the shooting experience. Now, when it comes to buying a camera and using a camera, I think the shooting experience is one of the most important things. These days, most modern cameras take great photos. It doesn't matter whether you pick up a Nikon, Canon, Sony, whatever. You're going to get good image quality, you're going to take great photos. But for a camera and camera range, which has such a focus on photography, I find the act of taking a photo to be really disappointing. By this, I mean when you press the shutter button, it gives you little to no physical feedback and no audio feedback. Now, this can be seen as a positive, as the camera makes absolutely no sound when you take a photo. However, when you do press the shutter button and you receive no feedback, one, you question whether you've actually taken a photo, and secondly, it can sometimes feel like I'm shooting on a smartphone and not on an expensive camera. Now, some of you probably won't care about this and you may feel like I'm nitpicking, but I really do feel the experience of using and taking photos to be, as I said, as important as the image quality, the sharpness, and so on. It's a bit like when you buy a car. Yes, the technical aspects are important, but at the same time, how that car feels in the hand and how it feels when you're driving are equally as important. The same goes for photography. And for me, it's the biggest disappointment when it comes to the X100VI. Another issue I've had with the X100VI is how slow it is when it comes to switching between photography and video. Now, in order to go from video mode to photography or vice versa, you have to hit the drive button and scroll down the menu to video, which is annoying because if you're walking around and you come across something interesting, you've taken a couple of shots, and then you want to quickly record it, you have to go through the whole menu, and by that point you may have missed a moment. Talking of speed, I have found the X100VI to generally be a pretty slow camera to use. A lot of this is down to the older SD cards that it uses. Now, for a camera released in 2024 at this price, I feel the use of the older memory cards to be pretty disappointing. When it comes to battery life, the Fujifilm X100VI uses Fujifilm's older batteries, not the new ones you find in the X-T5 and X-H2S. Usually when I'm out shooting, I need at least 2 or 3 batteries to get me through the day. Again, for a camera this price, released in 2024, to still be using the old batteries is kind of annoying. I know they've updated the processor, so it takes more shots compared to the older versions of this camera on the same battery. I would like to see a newer or higher capacity battery being used with this camera. Another annoying decision Fujifilm made with the X100VI is to remove the directional pad from the back. Now, for some reason, Fujifilm is intent on removing as many buttons from the back of their cameras as possible. It's a bit annoying because I wasn't able to map all the hotkeys I wanted to the buttons at the back of the camera. And this meant for certain features, I have to go into the menu system, which takes time and it's something I don't want to be doing when I'm out shooting. And finally, when it comes to the weather sealing, you still have to buy an extra £100 adapter in order to make this camera weather sealed. When you pick it up from the shops for its retail price of £1,600, the camera isn't weather sealed, even though it's kind of sold like that. You have to pick up an adapter, this is the official one from Fujifilm, and screw it on to the front of the lens in order to make the camera weather sealed. There's 2 issues with this. Firstly, I wish Fujifilm would either change the design to make this camera weather sealed without having to use an adapter, or just include the adapter within the package. Secondly, the adapter does kind of take away from the look of the camera. I feel like it makes it a little ugly, and it does make it around ½ an inch longer too. Now, for a camera worth this much, I really feel Fujifilm should have included the adapter in the box. But yeah. With that aside, who is the X100VI actually for? Now, funny enough, I actually feel the demand for this camera is mostly driven by the look of it, both the look and the size, but mostly the retro design. And while so many of you are desperate to pick it up, I don't think this camera is actually a great option for the majority of photographers. If you're new to photography, I really wouldn't recommend this. I'd rather go for a cheaper X-T4 and X-T3 where you can really experiment with different focal lengths. If you're mostly into video, I'd go for an X-H1, X-H2S. Or if I'm looking for a small, lightweight camera which also takes great photos, I'd go for the Ricoh GR3X or GR3, both of which are cheaper than the X100VI. So in terms of usability and what you can do with it, there are better options than this camera, both on the video and photography front. In my opinion, this camera is perfect for travel photographers. If you're gonna walk around all day with a camera in hot conditions and you wanna record both photos and video, then it makes a great option. Or if you're looking for a secondary camera, so you already own an X-T5, X-T4, and you want a lightweight option for walking around with on a day-to-day basis, again, it's a great option. But as I said, for the majority of you, you probably don't need this camera. So to wrap this up, is the Fujifilm X100VI a good camera? Yes, I've used it for 6 months. I've loved using it, been very useful. What Fujifilm's managed to fit into a camera this small is really impressive. With that said, is it worth the hype? I don't think so. I feel lots of people buying this camera are purely buying it based on the design and the look. I feel there are cameras which are cheaper, which will better fit most people's and most photographers' use cases. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the X100VI. Do you own this camera? Do you have any questions about this camera? Drop those in the comments below and I will get back to you. Finally, a big thanks for watching this episode and I'll catch you in the next one.